Do you ever think about those Christmas cartoons from the 1970s, the ones so magical then that it feels unreal you will never see them again? Those cartoons filled living rooms with warmth, color, and excitement families counted on each December. How did something so loved vanish so completely? The Raggedy Ann and Andy Christmas Hour was the kind of animated special that felt stitched together with yarn, fabric, and pure holiday innocence. The sort of program that made children believe their own toys might come alive when no one was watching. Raggedy Ann moved across the screen with that soft, wobbly charm only hand-drawn animation could achieve, her button eyes catching the glow of Christmas lights in every scene. Families gathered on living room floors, plates balanced on laps, watching as Ann and Andy wandered through adventures that seemed pulled straight from a child's fever dream of wonder. The music was gentle, the colors were warm, and every frame radiated a handmade quality that modern productions simply cannot replicate. Studios poured care into every stitch of those characters, creating something that felt personal and precious to anyone who watched. But ownership of the characters shifted hands multiple times over the years, tangling the rights in legal complications nobody could untangle. The special aired only a handful of times before vanishing into a vault no lawyer could pry open. Today, only faded memories and a few grainy photographs prove it ever existed at all. Frosty's magical Christmas adventure existed in that strange gap before Rankin Bass turned the snowman into an official holiday icon, back when smaller studios could still take a swing at beloved characters without corporate interference. This version of Frosty looked slightly different in every scene, sometimes rounder, sometimes taller, his corncob pipe tilting at angles that defied the laws of snow and physics. The animation wobbled charmingly. Backgrounds looked like watercolor paintings left out in a blizzard, and the voice acting had that enthusiastic amateur quality that made everything feel homemade in the best possible way. Kids did not care that the budget was low because the heart was high, and Frosty's laugh echoed through living rooms like the sound of childhood itself. The story followed him through snowdrifts, past gingerbread houses, and into a climax involving glowing stars and promises of return. But when the official Frosty franchise tightened its grip on the character, this odd little special vanished overnight. No reruns, no home releases, just whispered memories from people who swear they saw something magical before it melted away forever. The Little Rascals Christmas cartoons captured the mischievous spirit of childhood holiday chaos in ways only the 1970s could deliver without apology. Spanky led his ragtag gang through schemes involving stolen cookies, crooked Christmas trees, and well-meaning disasters that spiraled hilariously out of control within the first 5 minutes of every episode. The animation had that scratchy, hand-drawn quality where characters sometimes drifted slightly off model, making them feel like sketches come to life rather than polished productions. Alfalfa sang carols in his signature cracking voice, Darla attempted to organize pageants that collapsed immediately, and Buckwheat improvised lines that made the whole cast break character in ways animators left in for charm. Parents watched alongside their children, laughing at gags that worked across generations. But the humor reflected its era in ways that aged poorly, and licensing for the Little Rascals became tangled in decades of ownership disputes nobody could resolve. The cartoons were quietly retired, never remastered, and rarely mentioned again. For anyone who caught them, though, the memory of that scrappy holiday joy still glows. The animated Nutcracker on Saturday morning arrived like an unexpected gift between cereal commercials and superhero adventures, catching children off guard with ballerinas instead of battles. The animation moved slowly, deliberately, with dancers holding poses a beat longer than physics should allow, creating a dreamlike quality that hypnotized anyone patient enough to watch. Backgrounds shimmered in pastel pinks and icy blues, painted with a softness that made the whole production feel like a living snow globe. The music echoed faintly, recorded in some distant studio where every note carried a slight reverb that added mystery to familiar melodies. Kids who expected action found themselves entranced by grace, and parents recognized melodies from their own childhoods. The Nutcracker prince battled mice with a seriousness that made the stakes feel real despite the gentle pace. But networks eventually shifted toward higher energy content, and bigger budget adaptations stole whatever spotlight remained. Without reruns or home releases, this delicate version faded into obscurity, leaving behind only the sensation of having witnessed something beautiful that no one else quite remembers. The Berenstain Bears' first holiday animation had all the charm of a bedtime story translated into motion, with crayons, patience, and perhaps a few cups of cocoa fueling the animators through long winter nights. The lines were thick, the colors slightly muted, and the characters moved with that slow, deliberate pace that made it feel like someone was turning the pages of a storybook right there on your television screen. Mama Bear offered gentle advice in a voice that echoed through the mono speakers with warmth that wrapped around the whole living room. Papa Bear stumbled through decorating with his signature enthusiastic clumsiness, managing to tangle himself in lights and knock over trees in ways that made children giggle and parents nod knowingly. Brother and Sister Bear scampered about in scarves that never stayed in place, discovering the meaning of the season through adventures both simple and sweet. The animation stuttered occasionally, and the snow looked more like confetti drifting lazily downward. But none of that mattered to children who already loved the bears from countless bedtime readings. Newer versions arrived with sharper lines and brighter colors, pushing this original quietly into forgotten archives. The Christmas That Almost Was Not Animated edition took the live-action holiday film and reimagined it with bouncy energy, as if someone decided the original needed twice as many sparkles and half as much gravity. Characters moved with exaggerated gestures, eyes grew wide during emotional moments, and Santa Claus nodded in looping animation cycles that made him look perpetually agreeable to whatever chaos unfolded around him. The villain looked less menacing than confused, wandering through scenes like he forgot why he was causing trouble. Songs from the original were reimagined with synthesizers and jingle bells layered thick. Kids loved the chaos, parents tolerated the noise, and everyone agreed that something about the whole production felt delightfully unhinged. The special aired during holiday marathon blocks, sandwiched between commercials for toys nobody remembers anymore. But master tapes were shuffled between studios during mergers nobody documented properly. Eventually, the animated remake slipped through the cracks entirely, existing now only in the foggy memories of those who caught it at exactly the right moment during some long-ago December evening when magic still felt possible. The Magic Toy Shop Christmas Mystery opened with a gentle snowfall and a creaky wooden sign swinging outside a shop that only seemed to exist during the holiday season. The narrator spoke in a voice that sounded like he had read thousands of bedtime stories, each word landing softly as the camera drifted through aisles filled with toys that blinked, wobbled, and occasionally winked at the audience. Wooden soldiers marched in uneven rhythm, their painted faces frozen in expressions of permanent surprise. Dolls swayed gently on shelves, their porcelain eyes following movements no child at home could quite explain. The mystery itself was charmingly simple, involving missing ornaments, suspicious shadows, and a resolution that rewarded patience and curiosity over action and speed. Kids watched with blankets pulled to their chins, convinced the toys in their own rooms might be having similar adventures after bedtime. But the special was syndicated through channels that changed ownership constantly, and master tapes were stored in facilities that prioritized newer content over vintage charm. Eventually, the reels were taped over or simply lost in moves nobody documented properly. The original Strawberry Shortcake Winter Special arrived before the character became the polished pastel icon of the 1980s, back when her bonnet was slightly oversized and her cheeks were painted a shade too rosy for realism. The animation had a grainy quality that made every scene look like a frosted cookie left too long on a winter windowsill, soft around the edges and slightly crystallized by time. Strawberry herself spoke in a voice that sounded like it was recorded inside an actual mixing bowl, echoing sweetly through speakers that added warmth to every word. Her friends drifted through scenes with stiff movements that betrayed limited budgets and ambitious hearts. The plot usually involved saving someone from a winter mishap or bringing warmth to a corner of Strawberry Land that had grown too cold. Children watched with wide eyes as the world of berries and baking came alive in ways picture books never quite managed. But licensing shifted to new corporate homes shortly after, tangling the original in agreements that prevented any re-release. The special became a ghost, never acknowledged, never remastered, existing only in the certainty of those who remember. Yogi Bear's Lost Christmas Caper was one of those blink-and-you-miss-it specials that aired in only a handful of regions at odd hours, usually tucked between local weather reports and afternoon movie reruns. Yogi wandered through a snow-covered Jellystone park with Boo Boo at his side, both determined to help Santa after his sleigh developed mysterious mechanical troubles above the ranger station. The animation had that classic Hanna-Barbera bounce where characters slid across backgrounds instead of walking, and mouths flapped enthusiastically without always matching the words being spoken. Yogi attempted to deliver presents using methods that violated park regulations, borrowing vehicles, commandeering picnic baskets, and charming tourists into helping with schemes they did not fully understand. Ranger Smith chased him through snowdrifts with the same exasperated energy he brought to summer episodes, never catching on that the chaos was for a good cause. But because the special aired regionally, no major studio archived the master reels. Local copies were reused, taped over, or simply misplaced during station changes. Today, only scattered memories and disputed plot details remain from those who watched. The Brady Kids Christmas cartoon captured that unmistakable 1970s blend of sunshine, polyester, and groovy optimism, except this time wrapped in holiday ribbons and dusted with animated snowflakes. The Brady Kids, already known for their psychedelic spin-off adventures, found themselves pulled into a Christmas mystery involving talking animals, magic ornaments, and guests from entirely different cartoons. The animation had that charming stiffness of the era where characters struck dramatic poses and held them just long enough for the audience to notice. Marcia tried to organize the perfect celebration, while Greg played it cool, despite juggling responsibilities nobody asked him to handle. Bobby and Cindy stumbled into trouble only Saturday morning logic could justify, and everything resolved with a musical number that felt both inevitable and surprising. The whole special radiated groovy warmth through its color palette alone. But licensing for the Brady Bunch became tangled in webs of ownership changes and distribution disputes that lawyers still argue about. The Christmas cartoon slipped through the cracks, surviving only in the memories of those who caught it at the right moment. The Partridge Family Christmas cartoon episode was the kind of 1970s holiday special that felt like someone took the spirit of the live-action show, added twice as many sparkles, and animated the whole thing with the brightest crayons the studio could find. The Partridge Kids, complete with perfectly feathered hair even in cartoon form, piled into their Technicolor tour bus for a holiday adventure that made very little sense and yet somehow felt exactly right. Every scene swayed to upbeat music that sounded like Christmas carols sped up just enough to keep the energy crackling. Lori tried to keep everyone organized while Danny took charge of situations he definitely should not have been leading. Little Tracy occasionally wandered off to talk to friendly animals that appeared without any explanation at all. The animation leaned into bold colors and expressive poses that made even simple moments feel dramatic. But the animated spin-off never found a stable home in syndication, and the Christmas episode suffered most from the shuffle. Licensing bounced between companies, reruns dwindled to nothing, and eventually the holiday special vanished entirely into the fog of forgotten television history. Deputy Dog's Christmas Snowstorm arrived on television screens with that laid-back Southern humor the character was known for, wrapped gently in a blanket of winter mischief and holiday warmth. The animation was simple, the jokes were cozy, and the characters moved with the slow, gentle pacing of a holiday morning when nobody was in any rush to do anything at all. The plot usually involved a snowstorm blowing through the swamp, sending Deputy Dog scrambling to keep holiday decorations from drifting away while preventing his friends from creating even bigger messes. Kids loved the gentle humor, the warm, drawling voices, and the way the snowfall looked like tiny cotton flakes drifting lazily across the painted backgrounds. There was something deeply comforting about watching a cartoon that never raised its voice or rushed toward any particular destination. But as decades passed, broadcasting rights grew tangled in complicated webs nobody could untangle. Some of the humor was deemed too outdated to air again. Reruns vanished, home releases never materialized, and the special slipped quietly into obscurity where only those who caught it during a lucky afternoon rerun still remember its gentle charm. Christmas with the Groovy Ghoulies was unlike any holiday cartoon before or since, a delightful collision of spooky fun and festive cheer that somehow made perfect sense to children of the 1970s. Imagine a group of cheerful monsters celebrating Christmas as if they were hosting a rock concert inside a haunted house, decorated with twinkling lights and plastic snow drifting from the rafters. The Ghoulies sang, danced, cracked jokes, and somehow made the spooky season work perfectly alongside the festive one without ever feeling like a contradiction. Kids adored the bright colors and silly humor, while adults found themselves humming the surprisingly catchy songs long after the credits rolled. The whole production bounced with an energy that felt both chaotic and perfectly controlled at the same time. But the special relied heavily on music owned by multiple companies, and when those rights expired, the whole production was yanked from circulation without warning. Attempts to reissue it ran into legal snarls that turned the special into television folklore. Today, it survives mostly as a nostalgic whisper among fans who remember the joy of watching monsters celebrate Christmas like the friendliest house band. The Gumby Christmas Playtime special felt like someone had crafted the entire holiday out of green clay, warm lighting, and pure imagination stretched into stop-motion magic. Gumby and Pokey wandered through a snowy clay landscape where every footprint looked freshly pressed, every tree shimmered with hand-sculpted care, and every character had that gentle wobble unique to claymation of the era. The story was simple and heartfelt, often involving someone needing help, something going missing, or a small Christmas miracle tucked into a pocket of the clay world waiting to be discovered. Kids watched in awe as each scene seemed to breathe in slow, careful motions that felt more like dreams than television. The textures were rich, the colors were warm, and the silence between musical cues made every moment feel precious and intentional. But claymation was fragile. The materials aged quickly, and the original master suffered damage that made proper restoration nearly impossible. With no reruns scheduled and no reissued copies circulating, the special faded from public memory. People who saw it still recall the soft glow of its world and the peaceful snow that looked like it might melt if you touched the screen. The Christmas Dinosaurs Save Santa was a bright prehistoric adventure that answered a question nobody thought to ask. What if dinosaurs helped Santa deliver presents on Christmas Eve? In the 1970s, educational dinosaur cartoons were all the rage, so naturally someone decided to combine the ancient creatures with holiday magic and see what happened. The result was cheerful brontosauruses pulling sleighs, chatty pterodactyls scouting rooftops, and a T-Rex with a surprisingly gentle heart who learned the true meaning of giving. The dinosaurs teamed up to clear snowy paths, carry giant toy sacks, and guide Santa's sleigh when his reindeer caught a seasonal cold that left them grounded. Kids loved seeing their favorite ancient creatures wrapped in scarves and singing holiday songs with voices that echoed across painted volcanic landscapes. The animation had that charming, slightly clunky look where every movement felt like a proud effort. But as interest in educational dinosaur content faded near the end of the decade, the special lost its audience and funding. Networks stopped airing it, studios shuffled priorities, and soon the Christmas dinosaurs marched quietly into extinction once again. The Wacky Races Christmas rally took the show's chaotic energy and wrapped it tightly in tinsel, snowdrifts, and competitive holiday spirit that made every lap feel like a celebration. All the racers returned, each determined to win the North Pole Cup while navigating snowy roads, slippery ice patches, and the occasional mischievous elf causing mayhem along the frozen track. Dick dastardly plotted elaborate holiday-themed traps while Muttley giggled with delight every time a snowman exploded in just the wrong place. The animation bounced with frantic energy, cars skidding through winter wonderlands painted in bright blues and sparkling whites. Kids leaned forward without realizing it, caught up in the chaos of vehicles rocketing across landscapes that looked like Christmas cards come to life. Every crash felt harmless, every scheme felt playful, and every finish line felt earned. But the special featured characters owned by several different rights holders, and once the contracts expired, the whole holiday rally fell into legal limbo. Attempts to re-air it were blocked by overlapping claims that nobody could untangle. Today it exists only in fleeting memories and a few blurry promotional images. Josie and the Pussycats' holiday road trip sent the band on a snowy cross-country musical adventure filled with bright costumes, catchy jingles, and plenty of cartoon hijinks that kept children glued to their screens. The group traveled from town to town, playing cheerful holiday concerts and solving small mysteries along the way that wrapped up neatly before the commercial break. There was a scene where the band performed on a moving sleigh that somehow stayed perfectly in tune despite the wind blasting past their faces. The animators took full advantage of the era's love for bold color palettes, turning every moment into a postcard of 1970s style that glowed through the television. Melody cracked jokes, Valerie saved the day with clever ideas, and Josie kept everyone moving forward despite holiday chaos following them like confetti in the wind. Kids loved the blend of music and adventure, while adults enjoyed the upbeat soundtrack. But when the show's overseas distribution deals expired, reruns quietly disappeared from schedules. The holiday episodes slipped into that strange void where content exists only in the memories of those who watched it at the perfect moment in their childhood. The Christmas Trolls of Timber Hollow was a woodland fantasy special that looked like it had been animated with crayons, moss, and the softest winter sunlight filtering through hand-painted trees. The trolls were more whimsical than frightening, with big noses, fluffy hair, and oversized mittens that made everything they touched seem gentler and warmer. There was a sequence involving glowing berry lanterns that felt so enchanting people still describe it decades later. The trolls danced in circles around a fire that shimmered like painted light, their shadows stretching and curling like characters of their own. The story followed their efforts to protect Timber Hollow from an unexpected winter disaster while preparing for their once-a-year holiday feast. Kids loved watching the trolls tumble through snow, gather glowing berries, and sing harmonies that sounded like lullabies mixed with wind chimes. But as animation standards evolved, the troll designs were labeled outdated, and concerns grew about how certain features might be interpreted by modern viewers. The special was quietly shelved, never remastered, and rarely mentioned again by anyone with authority to bring it back. The Great North Pole Talent Show was a musical spectacle that played out like a holiday variety hour hosted by elves who had clearly never rehearsed anything in their lives. Reindeer performed tap routines with hooves clicking against icy stages. Snowmen attempted comedy acts that melted halfway through their punchlines. And penguins delivered songs with so much enthusiasm that the audio sometimes distorted. One unforgettable act involved a gingerbread quartet that crumbled apart mid-song, yet somehow finished their performance with crumbs flying everywhere. Another featured an elf magician whose trick succeeded only because the animation occasionally skipped a frame at exactly the right moment. Kids watched in awe not because the acts were polished, but because anything could happen on that tiny, frosty stage at any second. The backgrounds shimmered with glittery blues and whites, giving the whole special a frosty glow that made living rooms feel colder in the best way. But the show relied heavily on original songs, and the music licensing fees ballooned over the decades. Networks refused to pay the renewal costs, and the special was withdrawn from circulation entirely to gather dust in some forgotten archive. Holiday hijinks with Huckleberry Hound brought the beloved blue dog into a chilly wonderland where everything that could go wrong during Christmas usually did, often in the most charming ways imaginable. Huckleberry tried decorating trees that fell over the moment he stepped back, sang carols slightly off-key while neighbors politely closed their windows, and attempted to help Santa in ways that created more trouble than assistance. One gag involved Huckleberry wrapping himself completely inside a string of lights, blinking in perfect rhythm with the background music while looking utterly bewildered. Another saw him trying to shovel snow in an animation loop so oddly timed that he never seemed to make any progress at all. Yet kids roared with laughter because the mistakes felt intentional, like part of Huckleberry's gentle holiday charm that made failure feel like success. The humor was light, the pacing slow and cozy, and the animation filled with that unmistakable Hanna-Barbera bounce. But as years passed, certain jokes and cultural references were deemed too outdated for modern reruns. Rights complications added another barrier, and the holiday short slipped quietly into retirement where only warm memories remain. The Misfit Robots Save Christmas was one of those specials that felt like it came straight out of a toy aisle where imagination mattered more than logic or engineering blueprints. The robots clanked around with stiff movements, blinking lights, and cheerful beeps that came from whatever sound effects the studio could find on short notice. Their mission was simple: help Santa when his workshop gears jammed or his conveyor belts froze from winter mischief nobody could explain. Kids loved the idea of toys saving Christmas, especially toys with mismatched parts and big hearts glowing warmly through their chest compartments. Each robot had a distinct personality despite looking assembled from spare parts found behind a hardware store. The animation had that charming jerkiness where movements skipped frames in ways that made the robots feel even more mechanical and endearing. But the entire special was sponsored by a toy company that eventually went out of business, taking all the broadcast rights with it. When the company folded, no one stepped in to preserve the cartoon, and it quietly disappeared from every schedule and archive. Santa and the Space Explorers was a bold attempt to mix two things children adored in the 1970s: holiday cheer and outer space adventures, promising galaxies full of wonder and distant worlds. Santa teamed up with young astronauts who traveled through glittery starfields on a mission to deliver gifts to planets waiting for a visit from the North Pole. The animation sparkled with cosmic swirls, twinkling nebulas, and futuristic sleigh upgrades designed by someone who had never seen actual spacecraft but had definitely dreamed about them. Kids loved how Santa floated in zero gravity with his beard drifting like a slow comet behind him. The astronauts wore shiny suits decorated with candy cane stripes, and their rocket left trails of stardust wherever it flew. Every planet they visited had its own culture and its own way of celebrating the season with unique traditions. But when networks phased out space-themed holiday content in favor of traditional fare, the special vanished from schedules. No reruns, no re-releases, just the faint memory of Santa riding through the cosmos with explorers who believed Christmas could reach the stars. The Littlest Elf's Snowy Journey was one of the softest, sweetest Christmas specials ever aired. The kind of program that felt like a lullaby translated into moving pictures and gentle winter dreams. The animation had that watercolor look that made every snowy hill seem hand-brushed, every detail glowing with winter softness that wrapped around viewers like a warm blanket. The story followed a tiny elf determined to deliver one lost present before sunrise, wandering through forests, across icy ponds, and beneath shimmering skies filled with stars that seemed to guide his path safely home. The narration was gentle, the music warm, and the pacing slow enough to feel like a bedtime story told by firelight. Children watched with drooping eyes as the little elf trudged through snowdrifts that sparkled like sugar scattered across velvet. But the special aired only once or twice in select regions, never released on tape, and the master copy was never preserved. As a result, no broadcast-quality version survives today. Fans describe scenes vividly, but no one can prove it existed except through childhood memories that glow softer with each passing year. The Christmas blizzard of Bongo the Bear was a regional treasure, the kind of holiday special only a handful of families ever saw during those lucky afternoons when the right channel played the right program. Bongo lived in a snowy forest that looked painted on frosted glass, every tree branch heavy with powder ready to fall at the slightest breeze. His gentle personality carried the story as he tried to protect woodland friends from a blizzard that arrived just before Christmas Eve. Kids adored the friendly animals, simple jokes, and warm tone that felt like someone reading aloud from a beloved picture book. The animation moved slowly, deliberately, giving every scene room to breathe and every character time to express emotions. But because the cartoon aired on a small regional station, it never reached nationwide syndication or found the larger audience it deserved. Tapes were reused or misplaced over the years, and local copies did not survive the transition to newer formats. Today, only those within that original broadcast area remember Bongo's brave, cozy adventure through the storm. The Carefree Christmas Circus special was exactly what it sounded like, a holiday celebration bursting with acrobats, jugglers, tightrope walkers, and a ringmaster who narrated with dramatic flair that made each act feel like the greatest show on earth. The animation bounced with bright colors and swirling spotlights, making the whole special feel like a miniature circus tent filled with winter magic. Kids watched wide-eyed as performers flipped through the air, spun plates on impossibly long poles, and juggled ornaments high above the ring while cheerful music played. There was a warmth to the production that made the circus feel like family, a place where everyone belonged and every act received thunderous animated applause. The animals performed alongside human characters, adding whimsy that children especially adored. But in later years, shifting views on animal welfare and circus content caused studios to retire the special entirely. It has not aired in decades, leaving behind only the warm memory of a circus that celebrated Christmas with fearless joy under painted canvas skies. Only Animaniacs could turn a studio executive into Santa Claus and still make it feel like Christmas. A Christmas Plotz was chaotic, self-aware, and completely in character for the Warner siblings. Yakko, Wakko, and Dot brought their trademark blend of parody and pandemonium to the holidays. But beneath the slapstick and satire was a surprising amount of heart. The story was a clever spin on A Christmas Carol, with the studio head learning about generosity from the Warners themselves. It was loud, colorful, and packed with jokes that flew over kids' heads but landed perfectly for adults. Yet, somehow, in the middle of all the nonsense, it captured the true spirit of the season, joy through laughter. The episode reflected what made Animaniacs timeless. It never talked down to its audience. It gave you jokes, songs, and moral lessons without ever losing its edge. It was Christmas through the eyes of the Warner Brothers and their sister, Dot. Unpredictable, a little chaotic, but always full of heart. Even now, the balance of humor and sincerity makes it one of the most unforgettable holiday cartoons of the decade. Too Close for Comfort took the idea of an overprotective dad to hilarious new extremes. Ted Knight starred as Henry Rush, a cartoonist who couldn't quite separate his family life from his art, or his adult daughters' personal lives. When his daughters decided to rent out the apartment below his San Francisco home, Henry's world turned upside down. Every episode became a tug-of-war between his parental instincts and their growing independence. Knight's delivery, equal parts bluster and vulnerability, made Henry both infuriating and lovable. The daughters' quick comebacks kept him on his toes, creating comedy that was both fast-paced and affectionate. The show perfectly captured the clash between old-school values and the changing attitudes of the 1980s. It was about learning to let go, one punchline at a time. Too Close for Comfort thrived on its relatable family squabbles and Ted Knight's comic genius. By the end of every episode, no matter how stubborn Henry had been, love always won, and that mix of humor and heart made it a staple of the decade's family sitcoms. Neon everything was not a trend, it was a takeover. Shirts, socks, shoelaces, scrunchies. If it could be worn, it could be neon. Bright pinks, electric greens, yellows so vivid they could stop traffic. Walk into a classroom in the 1980s, and you might see a dozen students glowing like highlighters. It was not subtle, it was not sophisticated, but it was unforgettable. Neon made sure you were seen from across the street, or the roller rink. Entire outfits were built around one blinding shade. And the braver kids, they mixed them. A neon blue shirt with neon orange shorts and lime green shoelaces. Why not? Matching was optional. Visibility was everything. Neon told the world you were loud, proud, and unbothered by what anyone else thought. It showed up in birthday parties, aerobics tapes, and mall photo booths. Looking back now, it seems like a color explosion. But that was the magic. Neon was confidence in color form. It was youth, amplified. It was chaos, celebrated. And for those who wore it without a hint of irony, it was the brightest part of a decade that refused to dim. Few specials captured the feeling of magic and mischief like the Smurfs Christmas special. Long before endless reboots and digital effects, This hand-drawn episode reminded viewers why the little blue characters became household icons. The story began with Gargamel's usual scheming, but quickly turned into something bigger, a tale about generosity, forgiveness, and the spirit of the season. The animation, drenched in soft blues and whites, looked like a winter postcard come to life. The Smurfs' village felt alive with laughter, music, and that sense of unity that defined the series. This special was a perfect example of how simple storytelling could still move hearts. It showed that heroism did not always mean fighting. Sometimes it just meant caring for your neighbor, even when times were tough. For children growing up in the early 80s, it was one of the first introductions to the idea that kindness could be powerful. The Smurfs may have been tiny, but their Christmas message was huge. Watching it now feels like rediscovering a piece of innocence that television lost somewhere along the way. Kate and Allie was one of the first sitcoms to show that family could look a little different and still be just as funny, warm, and real. Susan St. James and Jane Curtin starred as two divorced mothers who decided to move in together and raise their kids under one roof. What followed was a witty, relatable look at modern life, filled with both hilarious clashes and heartfelt moments. The two women had completely different personalities. Kate was carefree and impulsive, while Allie was practical and cautious. Their friendship became the show's foundation, proving that love and support didn't always have to come from romance. The humor came from everyday struggles, dating disasters, parenting headaches, and career challenges, but it never lost its optimism. The show handled its progressive themes with subtlety, never preaching, but always empowering. Kate and Allie resonated with viewers because it reflected the reality of so many families in the 1980s, imperfect, adaptive, and endlessly resilient. It was a sitcom that made you laugh, nod in recognition, and believe that friendship really could get you through anything. Some inventions solve problems, others create them. The television with a built-in VHS player was supposed to be the ultimate convenience. One machine, one cord, one less reason to crawl behind the entertainment center. But this Frankenstein creation was as clunky as it was cursed. The built-in player jammed constantly. Tapes got eaten, ejected halfway through, or refused to rewind. And if the television broke, say goodbye to your movie nights. Repairs were complicated and expensive. If the VHS part failed, you were stuck with a giant screen that could not play anything. If the television part failed, you had a glorified tape storage box. The worst was when you were watching something and the tape chewed itself mid-scene, turning your favorite film into spaghetti. Still, it looked high-tech at the time, and for a short while, having one meant you were fancy. But like many 1980s trends, style outpaced practicality, and homes across America quietly swapped them out for separates once again. But if you wanted to keep the glow alive without the bulk, the next trend did it in the smallest, brightest way possible. Let us talk about glowing in the dark on everything. Atari gaming sessions were pixelated magic. You plugged in a cartridge, gripped a joystick, and entered a world made of blinking squares and bleeping sounds. The graphics were basic, the controls were stiff, and yet you were hooked. Pong, Frogger, Space Invaders. Each game was a challenge, a test of reflexes and patience. You played alone, with friends, or against your sibling for hours. The television hummed, the screen flickered. The joystick squeaked under the weight of your determination. Games froze, scores reset. But the fun never stopped. Atari brought the arcade home, turning dens and basements into battlegrounds of bragging rights. There were no saves, no checkpoints, just you and your ability to last longer than your last game. Every win felt epic, every loss felt personal. And if the cartridge did not load, you took it out, blew into it like a sacred ritual, and tried again. Atari gaming was simple, frustrating, and unforgettable. It was not about the graphics, it was about the experience. And for those who held that joystick and battled blinking enemies, those early games are etched in memory. Proof that sometimes a bouncing square was all it took to feel like a hero. Twister was the game that got people off the couch and tangled in each other's limbs. Released in 1966, it came with a plastic mat covered in colored circles and a spinner that decided your next move. Left hand red, right foot green. Before you knew it, you were stretching across the mat in a precarious pose, face pressed against someone's knee, hoping no one slipped. It was silly, physical, and weirdly intimate. Some parents called it indecent. Some schools banned it. But kids loved it. So did teenagers. It broke the ice at parties, sparked laughter between siblings, and gave families something active to do together. It was as much about falling over as it was about winning. The rustle of the mat, the sound of giggles as someone toppled, the concentration in trying to stay upright, it was all part of the fun. Twister took no prep and delivered instant chaos. It did not care about strategy. It cared about balance, luck, and how far you could stretch without collapsing. And for many, it was the first time a game made you move, laugh, and fall down all in one messy, unforgettable moment. Garfield's Christmas special was not flashy, loud, or overloaded with spectacle. It was something much more important. It was real. Airing in the late 80s, it took Garfield out of his usual cynical comfort zone and brought him somewhere different, the family farm. John, Odie, and Garfield traveled to spend Christmas with John's parents and grandmother, and what followed was one of the most touching pieces of animation of that era. The humor was still there, with Garfield's lazy wit and sarcastic charm, but beneath it was a soft nostalgia that caught everyone by surprise. The grandmother, remembering her late husband, delivered a moment that stopped everyone cold. It was not cartoonish sentimentality. It was honest emotion wrapped in holiday warmth. The music, composed by Ed Bogas and Desiree Goyette, set the perfect tone, half melancholy, half comfort. It was about coming home, realizing what family really means, and finding joy even in the smallest moments. Garfield may have started as a comic strip about lasagna and naps, but here he showed something bigger. The holidays are about remembering who you love and why. There are hundreds of Christmas specials, but very few ever hit that perfect note of humor and heart quite like this one did. If you wanted a sitcom that could make you laugh and still surprise you, Night Court was it. Set in a Manhattan courtroom that never slept, the show revolved around the unflappable Judge Harry Stone, a magic-loving, jazz-listening oddball who somehow kept order among the chaos. Every night brought in a parade of bizarre defendants, protesters, pranksters, and plenty of repeat offenders, and an even more eccentric crew of lawyers and clerks. The humor was sharp, rapid-fire, and often surreal, but the show's secret weapon was its warmth. Amid the slapstick and one-liners, Night Court showed compassion for the strange, the lost, and the misunderstood. The mix of courtroom antics and human stories made it stand out from the typical workplace sitcom. The cast chemistry, especially between Harry Anderson, John Larroquette, and Marky Post, kept the show alive for nearly a decade. It was unpredictable, heartfelt, and often ahead of its time in addressing real social issues under layers of absurd comedy. When the gavel finally dropped in 1992, Night Court had already earned its spot as one of the most uniquely funny and oddly touching shows of the 1980s. The Trapper Keeper was not just a binder, it was a lifestyle. This glorious slab of plastic with vibrant covers, think unicorns, neon grids, or random geometric chaos, was the crown jewel of any school supply list in the 1980s. But what really made it iconic? That Velcro closure. The loud, slow rip of peeling open your binder was like a thunderclap in homeroom. One kid opened theirs? Fine. 20 kids did it at once? It sounded like the floor was being ripped up. Teachers hated it. Students loved it. The inside was perfectly organized with color-coded folders, pockets for notes, and room for a calculator or 3-scented pens. But the noise? That was the deal breaker. Eventually, some schools banned them altogether, citing disruption of learning, which is code for "this binder is louder than the morning announcements." But let us be honest, part of the appeal was the noise. It said, "I am prepared and I am here to cause mild chaos." The Trapper Keeper burned bright, and then it was gone. But if you were not cradling one of these masterpieces, you were probably outside spinning on something equally unnecessary and questionably effective. Let us talk about the portable dance revolution that was basically just fancy cardboard. Boombox battles turned sidewalks into stages and backpacks into speaker cabinets. In the 1980s, carrying a massive boombox on your shoulder was more than a way to listen to music. It was a declaration. You had style, you had taste, and you had batteries heavy enough to power a small city block. These machines blasted everything from hip-hop to hair metal, and they did not ask for permission. You walked down the street with your soundtrack trailing behind you, volume all the way up, head nodding to the beat. Some kids parked them at basketball courts. Others lined them up outside corner stores. Whoever had the best bass usually won the crowd. Tapes were traded, dials were turned, and sometimes spontaneous dance-offs broke out right there on the pavement. Boomboxes were heavy, awkward, and impossible to ignore. But in a time before smartphones and Bluetooth, they were portable pride. They made noise. They made statements. And if you saw someone approach with a fresh cassette in hand and a boombox on their shoulder, you knew something good was about to happen. Boombox battles were not just about the music. They were about being seen, heard, and remembered. Mini skirts arrived like a fashion revolution. Short, sharp, and bold, they sliced through the conservative silhouettes of the 1950s and became the defining garment of the 1960s youth movement. Popularized by designers like Mary Quant and embraced by British mod culture, the miniskirt represented freedom, rebellion, and a new kind of confidence. It was daring but playful, feminine but fierce. Hemlines rose, attitudes shifted, and suddenly women were claiming space on the streets, on the dance floor, and in the workplace. The skirt barely reached mid-thigh, often paired with bold patterns, bright colors, or textured fabrics like corduroy and vinyl. Worn with turtlenecks or boxy jackets, it was as much about contrast as it was about comfort. Women weren't just dressing up, they were dressing out, outward, loudly, visibly. Some schools banned them, some parents frowned, but the miniskirt kept rising in popularity and in cut. It became a uniform of sorts for women carving out new identities in a changing world. They were photographed on street corners, in protest marches, at record stores, and in the pages of glossy magazines. Photos from the time show crowds of young people in knee socks and miniskirts, smiling wide, striding forward. It was not just fashion, it was a statement. And for those who lived it, it is still stitched into the fabric of memory, one daring hem at a time. What happens when you take every beloved Jim Henson creation and put them under one snowy roof for the holidays? You get one of the most heartfelt and chaotic Christmas specials ever made. A Muppet Family Christmas was something rare, even for the 80s. It was the one time where the Muppets, the Fraggles, and the Sesame Street gang all came together like one big family. It was full of jokes, songs, and that beautiful sense of warmth that only Jim Henson could capture. The story was simple. Everyone gathered at Fozzie Bear's mother's farmhouse for Christmas, but behind that simplicity was something far deeper. You saw the Muppets as you remembered them. A little messy, a little loud, but endlessly human in spirit. The special had everything that made that decade magical. Puppetry that felt alive, laughter that felt genuine, and a quiet message about togetherness in a changing world. It was also the last time many of those characters appeared together before licensing and ownership split them apart. Watching it now almost feels like peeking into a lost photograph, one that reminds you what television felt like before corporations decided who could share the stage. It was a Christmas miracle that could only happen once, and that is why it lingers in memory like a song you cannot forget. Square Pegs, 1982 to 1983. Sarah Jessica Parker's early role in a short-lived but beloved teen sitcom about awkward high school outsiders. Square Pegs might have lasted only one season, but for anyone who saw it, it was unforgettable. The show followed two best friends, Patty, Sarah Jessica Parker, and Lauren, Amy Linker, as they struggled to fit in at Wee High School. They weren't popular, glamorous, or confident. They were the outsiders who never quite got it right, and that made them instantly relatable. In a decade obsessed with perfection, Square Pegs celebrated imperfection. Its humor came from small, painfully real moments, failed crushes, embarrassing mistakes, and the desperate hope of being noticed. The dialogue was fast, awkward, and full of teenage honesty, capturing the rhythm of real adolescent life in a way few shows dared to. Parker's natural charm and vulnerability made Patty stand out as a character who felt genuinely human, long before she became a style icon on Sex and the City. The show's blend of punk rock attitude, Valley Girl slang, and heartfelt storytelling made it a cult favorite. Critics loved it for being smart and ahead of its time, even if audiences were slow to catch on. Though it was canceled after just 20 episodes, Square Pegs remains a hidden gem of the 1980s, a funny, awkward, and authentic look at the teenage experience that still resonates with anyone who's ever felt like they didn't belong. You sat in a folding chair, you stared ahead, and then the photographer said, "Say cheese," while lasers exploded behind you. That is right. We are talking about laser backgrounds in school photos. For some reason, every kid in the 1980s decided the best way to capture the innocence of youth was to be immortalized against a backdrop that looked like a Star Trek rave. Bright blue and hot pink lasers crisscrossed behind you like you were dodging security beams in a heist movie. You could be wearing a Mickey Mouse sweatshirt, and the background would make you look like you were breaking into NASA. It was peak 1980s over-the-topness, loud, flashy, and totally unnecessary. But somehow every kid wanted it. It was the photo choice that said, "I am ready for the future," and also recess. Parents either loved it or groaned at it. And looking back now, it is a nostalgic masterpiece of absurdity. Sure, it aged poorly, but there is something kind of wonderful about a generation that thought lasers made everything better. That includes the next wild invention too, tiny wrist gadgets that promised futuristic fun but usually conked out before lunchtime. Rubik's Cubes sat on coffee tables like miniature monuments to frustration. Their colorful sides promised fun, but more often delivered rage. You twisted, you turned, you thought you had it, and then disaster. One wrong move sent you back to square one. Solving it became a badge of honor. If someone at school could actually complete a Rubik's Cube, they were treated like a genius. Crowds gathered, applause broke out, but most of us faked it. We peeled off the stickers and rearranged them to make it look solved, or we popped out the pieces and snapped them back into place. Technically cheating? Maybe. Spiritually rewarding? Absolutely. There were books, guides, even videos explaining how to beat the cube, but few had the patience. And yet, we all kept trying. Rubik's Cubes lived in junk drawers, backpacks, and classroom desks. They were part toy, part puzzle, part stress test. Looking back, they were frustrating, addictive, and completely iconic. And to this day, if you spot one on a shelf, your hands remember the rhythm of twist, turn, twist, even if your brain still has no idea how to actually solve it. Bugles arrived in 1966, and with them came a whole new shape of snacking. Shaped like tiny trumpets or cones, they were the snack you could eat or wear. Kids popped them onto their fingertips, wiggled their hands like claws, and then crunched them down one by one. But the novelty was not just in the shape. Bugles had a distinct texture, light, crispy, and a little flaky, that made them feel different from chips or pretzels. The corn-based flavor was salty, a little buttery, and oddly addictive. Unlike many snacks of the era, Bugles were not trying to copy something else. They were their own thing. Whether poured into a bowl for a party or packed into a lunchbox for recess, they brought a certain crunchy cheer to any setting. Parents liked that they were baked, not fried. Kids just liked that they were fun. Bugles became a staple of 1960s snack shelves alongside pretzel rods and Fritos, but they stood out for their playfulness. Even now, decades later, slipping a bugle onto your finger sparks a flash of childhood. They were silly, satisfying, and one of the few snacks that doubled as a costume. A Chipmunk Christmas is one of those specials that hits you where you least expect it, right in the heart. At first glance, it is everything you would expect from Alvin and the Chipmunks: singing, mischief, and that high-pitched cheer that filled every living room. But then it turns quietly profound. Alvin gives away his most prized possession, his golden harmonica, to a sick child who believes it will make him better. It is a simple act of kindness that drives the entire story, turning what could have been another novelty cartoon into a deeply emotional fable. The animation is cozy and warm, almost glowing in that early 80s palette of deep reds and browns. The music, especially the rendition of "Christmas Don't Be Late," feels more heartfelt here than anywhere else. This special captured something rare, innocence without irony. It reminded people that generosity does not come from abundance. It comes from empathy. You did not watch it for action or laughs. You watched it because for a few quiet minutes, it made you believe again in the small miracles that define the season. It is the kind of story that television rarely tells anymore. In Charles in Charge, Scott Baio played the world's most patient college student/babysitter, living with a suburban family and helping raise their kids while keeping his own life on track. Charles was the cool older brother everyone wished they had, laid back, responsible, and always ready with advice that somehow made sense even in chaos. Every episode revolved around him juggling teenage drama, romantic mishaps, and his own college responsibilities without losing that relaxed grin. The humor came from his attempts to stay calm amid the madness, a skill that made him the rock of the household. The show reflected a softer side of 1980s sitcoms, clean, upbeat, and centered on family values. It didn't try to reinvent comedy, it just made people feel good. The catchy theme song, "New Boy in the Neighborhood," became a little anthem for a generation that grew up with Charles as their moral compass. Charles in Charge was simple but sincere, a feel-good snapshot of 1980s optimism where every problem could be solved with kindness, patience, and maybe a cheesy grin. Acid wash jeans were loud before you even opened your mouth. With their blotchy patterns and faded splotches, they looked like someone had taken a bleach bottle to denim, and somehow, that became cool. These jeans were rebellious, messy, and unmistakably 1980s. Everyone had a pair. Some wore them tight-rolled at the ankle, others let them drape over high-top sneakers. Acid wash showed up in jackets, skirts, and full matching sets that turned entire outfits into walking eye strain. You could not blend in wearing acid wash. You stood out, and that was the point. It was denim with attitude. Rough, bold, a little chaotic. Parents hated it. Teachers rolled their eyes. But teens embraced the weirdness. It felt edgy, like you were wearing the uniform of a generation that refused to dress quietly. Old photographs now show groups of kids lined up in front of lockers, each one looking like they had just emerged from a bleach accident and loving it. Acid wash was not timeless, it was not flattering, but it was unforgettable. And in a decade known for excess, it fit right in. Even now, pulling on an old pair brings back the noise, the neon, and the thrill of breaking the fashion rules. Television commercials in the 1960s were more than just breaks between shows. They were cultural events in miniature. With only a few channels and no fast-forward buttons, families watched together as jingles and catchphrases embedded themselves in the national memory. Plop, plop, fizz, fizz. You already know the rest. These ads had staying power. Cereal mascots danced across the screen. Soap commercials turned kitchens into laboratories. And toy ads? They were irresistible. From Slinky to Mr. Potato Head, kids begged for whatever had just aired during Saturday morning cartoons. Commercials were peppy, earnest, and often downright charming. They starred smiling housewives, enthusiastic children, and baritone narrators who made even laundry detergent sound heroic. These were the years when brands did not just sell products. They sold a lifestyle, a vision of modern convenience and happiness. Parents trusted what they saw. Kids repeated the jingles under their breath. Even decades later, people can still sing along to a tune they heard once before dinner in 1966. Commercials from the 1960s did not just advertise. They became part of family rhythm, part of shared language, and part of what made the television glow a little brighter after each show. The holidays always feel bigger when you see them through a child's eyes, and no show captured that better than Rugrats. The Santa Experience. It was a perfect mix of chaos, laughter, and warmth, wrapped in the innocence of the early 90s. The babies, determined to catch Santa, turned the holiday into an adventure full of misunderstandings and mayhem. Everything about it felt familiar. The mall Santa, the blinking lights, the tangle of wrapping paper and excitement. Yet beneath the humor was something quietly profound. The special explored what happens when belief and doubt meet for the first time. Tommy's wonder, Angelica's selfishness, and Chucky's fear painted a picture of childhood far more honest than most cartoons dared to show. The snowy setting, soft lighting, and gentle music made it feel like a memory rather than a show. It reminded viewers that even when things go wrong, when gifts break or plans fall apart, the spirit of Christmas always finds its way back. That blend of messiness and magic is exactly why this special still tugs at hearts decades later. If these long-lost Christmas cartoons brought back a flicker of wonder, share your memories in the comments, tap like to keep the nostalgia alive, and subscribe so you never miss another trip into holiday magic.